Okay, so in this past life, my client went to a lifetime where she was in her late teens, early 20s, a female, living in like the medieval times, kind of the Renaissance era, very simple times. She comes into this scene where she's kind of foraging through a forest for herbs and plants and that sort of thing. She feels very free. She feels like a free spirit, wearing a very simple dress, bare feet. She has long brown hair, which she said was just like her current hair, very similar to how she felt her body was now. You could tell, though, that she didn't have a lot of money. Then she goes to her home. Her home is kind of just a rickety, falling apart, simple home. She said it was made out of like sticks. Her husband had made it. So she goes inside the house and it's very comfortable for her. It's very safe. She feels very good in her home. She starts taking out her herbs and plants that she brought home. And at one point, she noticed that she put the herbs down, but she didn't put them away. And she remembers noticing that and thinking, oh my God, what am I doing? I need to put these away. Well, you'll understand later that it's because if someone were to walk into her home and see all of these plants and this abundance of herbs and that sort of thing, it would be a red flag and she could get in trouble for it. So as she gets into her home, she notices her husband is there and he has made dinner for her. And it was this sense of he knew she had had a really long day. She'd been working very hard. So he was doing something for her by making her dinner, which was very kind. They had a very strong dynamic, very close, a very supportive relationship. Her husband was a blacksmith. That's what he did for a living. When we went to see what she did for a living, she saw herself mending clothes for the townspeople. She saw herself as a seamstress, but being a seamstress was only her cover. It was a cover for what she really did, which was she was a healer. She would make plant medicines for the townspeople as well. But in that time, you would get in big trouble for that. That was punishable by death to be doing that type of work. It was considered witchcraft. It was considered illegal to be doing that. So she had to be very careful as to who found out about that. Again, hiding those herbs and so that if someone were to come around, they wouldn't catch her, basically. So how it worked for her and her husband was she would make all of these plant medicines and the clothes, and he would make whatever it was that he made as blacksmith, so tools and I'm assuming weapons or something like that, or whatever the townspeople needed. Then the husband would go to town. He would bring all of those products to town, but then he would also kind of under the table deliver all of these plant medicines and the things that his wife, that she would make for the people that needed them in town. And she noted that her husband was a very generous man. So a lot of times if somebody couldn't afford the medicines, he would just give them to them. The townspeople didn't have a lot of money. So that's why they lived so simply. And also that's why he gave away a lot of those medicines and stuff. So something else she noted, which was really interesting about the husband, was the fact that he was very, very supportive of these choices that she made with what she did in terms of the plant medicine and being that healer. That was a big risk for him to be that supportive, and he didn't think twice about it. He was had her back the whole time. He supported her completely. He in fact was part of delivering and that sort of thing. So it just showed how much he really truly was there for her and supported her in everything that she did and what she stood for, and her free spirit that she was, and so he was really her everything. Then we went to the first important day. The first important day gave us some insight as to how she went about her day with the seamstress job that she had. She saw herself in an open field of a bunch of sheep that they had. Her husband would kind of herd each sheep into this little corral, this little stall or something, and then she would actually do the clipping of the wool. So she would clip the sheep, and then she would use that wool to make the clothes and whatever she needed to make. So it was very labor intensive. She was doing a lot of work with this cover job of being a seamstress. And I think it was showing too that they worked very well together. He supported her again by being a part of kind of helping her with the sheep and that sort of thing. So then we went to the second important day. This one was pretty traumatic for her. She saw herself coming back home after being out foraging all night for a specific herb or plant that she could only find in the nighttime, that was only blooming in the nighttime. So she saw herself coming back to her home, which had been burned down overnight, and her husband died in the fire. A couple things that are important to note in this scene is the immense grief, obviously, that she felt with losing her husband. That was her everything. He was literally her everything in her mind. He was her emotional support. He was how she survived. They worked so closely together and so well together to do what they needed to do to survive. So she was feeling that grief for losing him, but also this fear of what is she going to do? How is she going to go on? And then she also felt some guilt because in her mind, she felt like the fire had been started because she had left some wool out, and one of his tools that also was left out or was still hot or whatever had caught that wool on fire, and that's how it happened. And again, if we flash back to the first scene where she was nervous about leaving things out that she wasn't supposed to, so this is again a repeat of that, where she felt this guilt that she should have put it away. If she would have just put it away, when the fire wouldn't have happened and he would have been fine. So she was feeling that guilt in that scene. She was also feeling guilt for not being home. She's like, oh my God, if I wouldn't have been out foraging, I would have been home to be able to wake up or do something about the fire and avoid that. So then we go to the last day. The last day, she decided to take her own life. She didn't know how she could live without him. Emotionally, she didn't know how to handle that. Without him, he was such a big emotional support. She didn't know how she could go on living and surviving and doing what she needed to do to make the money that she needed to. She didn't know how she would survive the winter. The winter was coming, and so she was worried about that. She's like, what am I going to do once it gets cold? And he's, back then you had to cut wood down for the wood stove, and you had to do all of these things that we don't think about these days. But having him not there, she didn't understand or couldn't figure out how she would do that and make that work. She also couldn't figure out how she would possibly even go about starting over, because in her mind, she would need to find somebody that would accept her and these things that she wasn't really supposed to be doing in that day and time. She would have to find somebody who would accept all of those things that she did, and in her mind that just was not possible. So she was desperate and decided that the best route would be to slit her wrists. So that's what she did. So this is when she figured out that people from her current life was her ex-husband was that husband in that past life. which was interesting for her because it was such a different dynamic. Once we looked at what the life lesson was, which was I ended my life too soon, I should have continued on my path of healing people and living on my own, that's when we realized the reason for her husband in this current life, or I should say her ex-husband, why it was important for him to play that part of somebody that didn't live up to her standards. It was because he needed to play that part of not being her support system, because her purpose this time around was to be her own support system and to pursue her healing career on her own without leaning on him the way that she did in that past life. And the only way that she was going to be able to do that on her own was if he was a completely different person, and if he was not somebody that she was able to lean on. And that allowed her then to follow her heart and do what she needed to do, what she knew she needed to do, which was this healing work. So in this current life, he was not okay with any of her spiritual endeavors. She does tarot cards, and tarot cards were not allowed in their house. And so she had, for a long time, had to shut that part of herself down while she was in that relationship. She realized that she needed to live in her authenticity and follow her heart instead of leaning on him and making what he wanted her life. When we do these regressions, I always set the intention to whatever past life is affecting my client the most is what past life will be shown to them by their higher self or by their subconscious. So when I asked her, why is it do you feel that you were shown this lifetime today? Her answer was that she's been really wondering and confused as to why he would have done those things and acted the way that he did and treated her the way that he did when something inside her felt like that just wasn't him. Something inside her felt like that was her soulmate, and it was very confusing to her to have him betray her the way that he did. And she was just talking to somebody about that earlier, trying to kind of work through that, because it's at this stage in her life right now that she's also really starting to pursue her tarot readings and, in fact, making it very public right now. She's on TikTok doing these things, and it's going really, really well for her. It just started, I think, within the past couple months, maybe even shorter than that. So it seems that right now her soul is needing to get this clarity and find this understanding so that she can now step into that next chapter that she has always been meant to be playing, which is stepping into that healing role on her own, standing on her own 2 feet, supporting herself emotionally, financially. And so it's a really exciting time for her because she's doing it. This is her way. This is kind of her last gift to be able to really understand the things that she needs to understand so that she can go ahead and just take the leap and put her energy where it needs to be. So I hope you got something out of this. If you resonate with this at all, if it reminded you of any of your relationships in this current life, then this message is also meant for you. So take what you want, leave the rest. Thank you all for listening, and I hope that I get to meet you for your own past life regression someday. I would love to meet you all. So have a great day, everyone. Bye.